Altered Physiology Mechanisms of Disease 1, Week 7, Episode 4, a continuation of our lecture series on cancer. In this week's episodes, we've been talking about abnormal cell growth, how cells divide without the typical regulatory control mechanisms, and how they are able to invade other tissues. In this particular episode, we will continue our discussion on the immune system and how it is implicated in cancer. Normally, what happens is that the immune system is actually able to protect against abnormal cell growth. However, there are several cases where immunosuppression exists. Immunosuppression examples include the patient who has HIV, or perhaps the patient who's undergone a heart transplant and is now taking immunosuppressive medication to prevent tissue rejection. In these types of cases, individuals are immune compromised. This environment may actually foster the development of cancer. In fact, we have release of immunosuppressive factors that may increase the resistance of a tumor to treatment, such that traditional therapies like chemotherapy and radiation no longer are able to be effective. These immunosuppressive factors are released into the tumor microenvironment and thereby contribute to treatment resistance. Now, taking a look at the next slide, to illustrate this point further, the immune system normally recognizes foreign microorganisms as being non-self. For example, being able to recognize antigens. In response, normally the immune system would mount a response to destroy these disease-causing agents, which essentially means that they're playing a similar role in protecting the body from malignancy. The damaged DNA in cancer cells frequently directs the mutated cell to produce abnormal proteins. These abnormal proteins are commonly referred to as tumor antigens. Antigens are known to be considered non-self. In many cases, our immune system is able to eliminate abnormal cells on a regular basis. However, there are cases where abnormal cells, such as cancerous cells, can go under the radar. They can go undetected and avoid the typical immune responses that would prevent the proliferation of malignant tumors. With impaired surveillance or that inability to detect cancerous cells, tumors are obviously able to proliferate. There are several explanations for why tumor cells can escape this immune response. You may have the tumor secretion of immunosuppressive factors, which inhibits the body's immune response, as I mentioned on the preceding slide. You may have tumors that simply do not alert or warn the body to the typical inflammatory signals. There may be a downregulation of the major histocompatibility class 1 expression, thereby enabling those non-self antigens to go undetected. These are just some examples. If you're looking at the figure on this screen, what we can see is that normally the immune system has a recognition of tumor antigens and T cells can be activated. However, there are cases where you have a failure to produce the tumor antigen. You may have mutations or downregulation of that major histocompatibility class genes that are typically required for antigen processing, or you may have the production of immunosuppressive proteins or an expression of inhibitory cell surface proteins that actually are able to inhibit T cell activation. Therefore, this diagram nicely summarizes the different mechanisms by which tumor cells can escape the typical immune responses in our human body. Lastly, there are a number of viruses that have been implicated with the proliferation of malignancies. A list of viruses has been shown on the screen. I will focus specifically on the human papillomavirus, HPV. HPV has been implicated with various cancers, including of the cervix, vagina, and vulva in women, as well as the penis in men, the anus in both men and women, and the throat in both men and women. It is important to note that when an individual is exposed to a particular virus, there is not an immediate effect. In fact, there is a latent period, or several years, for example, whereby the individual is asymptomatic and actually does not have cancer. However, over time, it may actually develop. Notably, HPV vaccination has been highly effective in reducing these types of cancer. This is an area of ongoing research. And that concludes this episode.